This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and the left is in full panic over Graham Cassidy, a vote scheduled for next week in the Senate, and McConnell reportedly getting close to the 50 votes he needs. According to Kim Strassel in the Wall Street Journal, this all turns on Lisa Murkowski because McCain will not have a repeat performance of what he did over the summer. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Kimberly Leonard. She is senior healthcare policy reporter for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Kimberly, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So is Strassel's handicapping of the Senate vote, is that about right, that it really is going to come down to what Murkowski does?
Well, it's going to come down to the same three that it came down to last time. But this time, Senator Rand Paul has said he's absolutely not voting for it. He hasn't backed down. So right now, you have one for sure no, and then you have probably Susan Collins as a no. But yes, everyone's watching Lisa Murkowski as well as Senator John McCain. And
McCain's alliance with Lindsey Graham, just generally speaking, and also the nature of this legislation, different than what was proposed over the summer, and different in terms of its impact on a state like Arizona, where the governor's come out in support of it. Same thing with Murkowski and the pressure she'll have in Alaska. Doesn't that change McCain's calculus?
Well, the thing that McCain has said from the beginning is that he wants to see regular order when it comes to considering a health care bill. So he wants open hearings. He wants time for amendments. He wants this all to have been discussed basically since the beginning of the year, and it hasn't been in the Senate. Initially, all of the bills were written behind closed doors. This time the bill was introduced last week, and we've had a little time to look over it and so forth. But the question is it going to be enough time? There's one hearing next week, and then they're expected to vote on it. We keep asking Senator McCain, is that regular order? And he pretty much shrugs it off. So it's tough to tell how he's going to vote. It doesn't seem like he's happy about how the process has gone.
Yeah, but it seems like, to make a process argument to vote against the substance of at least partial Obamacare repeal, that's going to be a tough case to make out for the senator.
Well, we'll see. He might be framed as inconsistent if he does that, just because this hasn't really gone through rigorous review. There are changes that people would like to see to it. And so if there isn't time to do all of that, he may vote against it. It's very hard to tell. He kept us waiting last time, if you recall, as well. He wouldn't tell us how to vote. So the same thing is happening now. And Lisa Murkowski has said, even though the bill contains special provisions for Alaska, because one of the things that's interesting about Alaska is that the health care there is so much more expensive than other parts of the country.
Right.
She said, even though it contains, special provisions for Alaska, she said, am I really going to vote for something that will, cause disruption for the rest of the country? And a lot of people aren't even necessarily as concerned about the bill's provisions as they are about the funding and the timeline. So they like the idea of state flexibility, but they're worried that states don't have enough time to come up with their own health care system.
Now, Senator Graham, co-author of the bill, was on with Brett Baer last night on Special Report. He claims that a couple of Democrats will be jumping on board and voting with Republicans. Are you hearing the same? And if so, which, besides maybe Manchin, do you think he's just talking about?
I know that they were trying to get Democrats. I will say that Senator Bill Cassidy has tried very hard to make this a bipartisan bill. And Senator Cassidy has hosted reporters at his office. He's gone through all the numbers. This is not like the last time where it was all behind closed doors and we didn't know what was in the legislation. Mm-hmm. They've been running through everything with reporters. But they also were trying to get Senator McCaskill on board because she might have a vulnerable seat for next year, and her state, Missouri, looks as though it could get additional funding from this bill. It doesn't seem like she will be on board, though, and the Democrats have been really on the same page with all of this. I would be surprised, but now very little surprises me when it comes to what happens in Washington.
And what about Senator Heidi Heitkamp? Is that a possibility?
That again is hard to see as well. The pressure that Democrats are under to oppose any changes to Obamacare is very, very, they've been unified this entire time. One thing I will say, though, is given that there was a single payer bill introduced last week by a number of Democrats led by Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent from Vermont, some Democrats might not be willing to say, I'm ready for the party to go in this direction. So they might say, okay, it's better to make alterations to Obamacare than go towards single payer, which would be a government-run system in which everyone would be enrolled into Medicare. That would probably be far off, but it might send signals that in my mind would be something that could sway certain Democrats, but they don't want to see Obamacare repealed.
An astute listener chastised me politely, constructively, and so I will pass this on to try and get this started.
Yeah.
It should be called single provider, term single provider, not single payer. It's government as the sole provider, not payer. It's still the taxpayers paying, and single payer makes it sound like it's, the government's paying, but you still have choice. It's still a private insurance marketplace, and it's not really. I think single provider is more descriptive.
Well, I covered one poll this week that was very revealing. It was by Politico and Morning Consult. And they found that 49% of those who were polled said they either strongly or somewhat supported single payer. And then there was a second question that asked participants whether they thought the government should have more or less control over the healthcare industry. And more people voted in favor of the government having less control. So there is some question here over whether people understand what they're being asked.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and so thus the marketing and the explaining is important, and also since you brought up the insurance companies, this is so funny too. The Jimmy Kimmels of the world that and the other demagogues that want to go out there and say I'm for the little guy when their position is to be in bed with the big insurance companies on these matters, including in this case where America's health insurance plans, the lobbying group representing American insurers, said this week it opposes Graham Cassidy because, I'm trying not to laugh, it could pave the way for states to implement their own single payer, as they term it, healthcare systems. Oh, the big insurance company, insurance companies, they're free market types now.
Well, and they don't like the way that Obamacare is going for them. A lot of insurers have lost a lot of money working in the exchanges, and there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot that are political. A lot was changed by the Obama administration and then the Trump administration. But that was one of the reasons that they said they opposed this bill. And Senator Lindsey Graham has said, we're fine with states implementing single payer if that's what they want to do. Just don't force it on every other state. But then there are other senators who said, shouldn't we add an amendment in here that prevents states from doing this? So there is a tension there.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like there's... I'm sorry. It doesn't seem like there's enough... It doesn't seem like there's enough cash, though, because we had this conversation with Ramesh Ponnuru from National Review and some others. It doesn't seem like there's enough cash for states to really implement single payer unless they're going to come up with a boatload more than they're going to get with the federal government.
Well, that's right. And a couple of states, California and Vermont, had considered implementing single payer under Obamacare because Obamacare does allow for some flexibility with approval from the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the federal health agency. It allows for some flexibility to change states' healthcare systems, but neither state had enough funding. It would be very expensive. One of the things that keeps coming up is that most employers who provide health insurance get major tax breaks from the federal government to do that. And so they would be foregoing a lot of that cash if they were to go single payer because they can't just get rid of those funds.
And isn't that also why you have the National Association of Medicaid Directors? Those must be fun conventions. Cautioning Republicans against against Graham Cassidy because it would undermine efforts to improve the country's health care because it would transfer financial risk from the federal government to the states. They don't want to wear the jacket for Medicaid either.
Well, there are some states that really, there are 15 governors who are behind this, and there are some states that really want this. But it has to do with, okay, who's going to get how much funding, and also, I would say, the health profile of some of these states. Some states would say, I'm almost willing to go with a little bit less in order to be able to do more with the money. So there is that desire from states to have more flexibility. And I'm working on a story that I'll be publishing later today that looks at ways that states have tried to get more flexibility from the federal government, whether that means investing Medicaid dollars into some of the social determinants of health, like housing, but being unable to do that because of lack of flexibility on the federal level.
She is Kimberly Leonard, Senior Healthcare Policy Reporter for the Washington Examiner. WashingtonExaminer.com is where you can find her work. Kimberly, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate your insights.
Sure, thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.